Hello, Tom Levecchia here with the latest edition of the Armchair NBA. I want to make sure that we are live. We are live. I'm here with a very, very, very special guest. His name is Rich Valdes, born in Brooklyn, raised in Hudson County, New Jersey, host of the This Is America podcast, and also producer over at the Mark Levin Show. Rich Valdes, welcome to the Armchair NBA. How you doing today, buddy?
Thanks, Tom. Always good to be here. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, and it's my pleasure. So what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about, and it's interesting because I know we can do this successfully, because if you go too much into politics, YouTube is going to probably knock us off the air. So I want to strict the policies, and are they ruining our country? So I want to start off with something that's near and dear to you and I as business owners, the labor shortage. Let's talk a little bit about that and how the current administration is perpetuating it, Rich.
Sure. Well, I think that the big deal here is that what we have is the federal government literally strong-arming and extorting small business owners by putting their thumb on the scale. This isn't just paying people to stay home, but they're literally saying, look, in the free market, you can have whatever goes, right? If I have this and you have that and you want to exchange, if we agree, we agree. But right now, that's no longer free with their thumb on the scale. Now they're saying, you know what? It's not even $15 an hour. Maybe we need 20, maybe we need 30, whatever. They're making up their own number, and they're holding small businesses and large businesses hostage, because they're saying, you know what? We'll come in. We'll meet you in the gap. Stay home, do a general strike, and you hold out until you get your number. So this is like they're unionizing every private small business in America, and they're doing it at our expense, right? Because it's the taxpayer that's paying for that. So I think that's what's happening here. It's not necessarily there isn't a shortage of people that want to work. There's a shortage of people that want to work for what the market is requiring.
And then on top of it, you know what? You're forced to pay $15 an hour, right? Let's say you're forced to, or even the market dynamic. What's happening, I'm noticing on the lower end of the market, you're not getting $15 an hour people. You know that, right? You're getting the people that were making 15 are now making 25 somewhere, and they're not necessarily the most skilled people. So you're having to find somebody. You find somebody, you train them, you overpay them for what you normally do. And you know this, you either absorb the cost, right, which you can't do as a small business owner, or pass it through to your customer at a difficult time where everybody's hurting. So which leads us to the next, and probably I think the labor shortage is the cause. And now the effect, inflation. Tell us about that, Rich.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of things here because, you know, Biden comes into office and he literally over that first weekend, he signed something like 52 executive orders, not the least of which was the one where he said, you know what, we're going to suspend natural energy, natural gas production, kill the Keystone Pipeline. So with that, they said, look, you're going to kill 10,000 jobs today. This is going to kill 100,000 jobs later. And exactly as it was predicted, it happened. So now we have energy prices that are going through the roof. We went from having an energy surplus to begging, right, via OPEC saying, oh, no, it's not me, it's OPEC. That's his current line, and him and Jen Circle back Psaki, that they say, oh, it's not us, it's them. But it sounds like a bad breakup. But the problem is we're the ones getting dumped, the American people, the consumer. So you kill the everything that's going on with energy production. You make us dependent on foreign sources of energy yet again. You Russia's energy pipeline, saying, no, you need that? Oh, I got you, man. No problem. You can do that. So you can go and sell natural gas and you can make some money, but we're not going to get into that game. Oh, because of climate change, of course. So all of that being said, you start that, you got truckers that are freaking out saying, oh, you know what, with the cost of diesel going up, the cost of gasoline going up, everything costs more. So a carton of eggs, a carton of milk, et cetera, all that's costing more. Now you add in the labor shortage, right? Or what I like to say, tipping the scales, or, you know, extorting small businesses. So now that also adds money, because you can't just tell somebody, hey, you've got to pay Tom Levecchia this many more dollars per hour because he said so. You can if you want to, but if it doesn't warrant it, if you know your business doesn't dictate that, it can't happen. So then what happens? Either I give you the money and I fire the other guy, or I fire the other guy. You know, it's a catch-22, and it's a lose-lose because there's going to be a pass-through to somebody. So it's going to be the consumer. It's going to be the employee, I think, that gets the short end of the stick. The employer is not going to say, oh, I'm going to make less money this year because of government regulations. I think they're just going to make sure somebody else absorbs that cost.
Well, what's crazy is, and and you get this dichotomy better than anybody. Democrats historically are for the working class. So now when I go to BJ's and it's 2 steaks are $52 and gas is $4, which Jersey's even lower than other places.
Yeah.
And everything's just more expensive. The wealthy man rolls off the shoulder. It's guys like you and I are getting crushed.
Sure.
So why is it like they're trying to help the middle class if they will, but they're actually hurting in your opinion?
Well, I think it's all rhetoric. They're not really trying to help any middle class. The idea of a class system to begin with is an idea that comes out of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto.
That's right.
And it's not really a thing. There was once this working class, if you will, or middle income people that said, you know what, I'm going to work. I'm going to make enough money to keep my wife at home and raise my kids. That's become wrong. You can't have a wife that stays home. Somehow you're bad if you do that. And what I mean is one income, right? Now you have to have 2 incomes, at least if you live on the East Coast or on the West Coast, because otherwise, and in a lot of big cities across America, it's the same way. You just can't afford to live the same way. So like, if you want to call it inflation or the cost of living increase, it has outpaced how much people are making. Yeah. And this is a big argument from the left where they go, oh, then we have to increase how much you make. The problem is, you can't just force that on people. Now they're trying to do that. And I'm going to say somewhat successfully. I think Bank of America has already succumbed to that, saying, you know what, everybody we hire is going to make $25 an hour or $70K a year. So there's a few companies that have signed on to this saying, yeah, no, what you say we'll do. But I don't think it's going to happen everywhere. And mainly when I just came back, no lie, I get I get a Cuban coffee every morning from this restaurant right here, Bogota, New Jersey. Great place. They've got 3 full-time people or 2 full-time people and a part-timer. If somebody comes and tells them, hey, listen, you're going to now have to pay this one that much and that much for this, and you're going to have to do this, they're either going to shutter their store or they're going to start charging me $3 or $4 for my $2 coffee. And this is the problem that we face.
But that's the best part. I can't go to my employer. Well, I are both entrepreneurs, but I can't go to my customers and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to charge you 20% more because I'm paying 20% more. The market doesn't work that way. And that's why we're getting crushed. All right. This is something I know near and dear to both of us. We're both, smart guys. We try to, always try to be fair, but also immigration policies. They also, I believe, are flanking us negatively, not just socially, but economically. Just give us how you weigh in on that.
Well, this is a big one because I think that the whole idea of this immigration debacle that we have going on right now is, and just to kind of, this fits right into the last question as well. We talked about this idea of the middle income worker, somebody that was once considered middle class. It's harder and harder to be a part of that middle class, to own a home, pay it off, send your kids to school, and live debt free. It's becoming an impossibility. Another reason that adds to this, in addition to the way they've usurped our position as an energy leader in the world, is that they're doing it with affordable labor or cheaper labor. So you've got all this illegal labor that's coming through, and some of which in some places aren't even working either. I mean, it used to be, they're coming here for a better way. The Democrats have engineered a plan that, and again, no tinfoil hat here. This is just pretty rudimentary stuff. When Marxists have taken over in different types of governments or tried to secure power, historically, they've always gone after what they call the peasantry. And we don't have enough of a peasantry in the United States because we're so rich, figuratively speaking, right? So they said, we're going to bring in poor people from somewhere else, from some of the poorest countries ever, like El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras. And when they get here, they're willing to work because they don't know better, right? They want to make money. That's every immigrant's dream, is to come here and pursue the American dream. So many of them are doing that. But in doing so, they're also selling them this bill of goods here, where they say you can come and piggyback off of all these social programs, and it's going to be terrific. You're going to love it. Free apartment, free healthcare, free everything. And they're like, hey, who wouldn't want to become an American under that circumstance? So you have that. You have this the border, which is being overrun. And again, typical Marxist tactic. They like to overthrow systems by using the very system, so that you clog it up with exactly what you've got. And then you go, oh my gosh, you're going to have to rely on me, the government, to save you. And it's this government savior complex that puts us in the position we're in. So we're seeing that at the southern border. It's not only, cheapening the cost of labor, which it's always done, but now that it's in record proportion, it's happening in record numbers.
So the other part is, and I want to be careful in the nomenclature, because I'm telling you right now, like, we do a lot more than 28 people. Like, the fact that you start talking about this stuff, the engines listen. So I don't care. I don't care if we only reach 28. I don't care if we reach 2,800. So my next thing is the vaccine. Again, listen, I'll be up front. You're my friend. You're a good guy. If if you have a comorbidity, if you have a situation where you are around people that have, comorbidities, would be asthma, whatever, like there is a place for it and there is science to back it. Right. But however, and that may be a macro argument, right? But in the micro argument, to say, hey, you have to take this and you can only go here or go there or go here or go there and do whatever, I believe is just stepping over the line. What happened to personal choice? So I kind of know where you're going to go with this, and I respect you, but you also are going to give an intelligent point of view. So give us your point on how the whole vaccine situation is being handled.
Well, this one again is it's not as cut and dry, I think, as everybody makes it out to be.
Yeah.
You have some people, that say we are going to, Noam Chomsky, for example, and I talked about this recently on one of my shows. He says, oh, well, in order to drive on our public roads, you have to agree to stop at stop signs. If you don't stop at the stop signs, you can hurt somebody. So, you can't just say you're not getting vaccinated. Others say, look, you can say you're not getting vaccinated, but if you're not going to get vaccinated, then you don't have a right to participate in society. Now, I think both of these arguments are flawed because of many different reasons. Number one, we've never seen a situation where we're in a situation of public health, and we have seen a pandemic like the Spanish flu, where we've required every part of society, right? If you have a job, whether you can, go in some places in the world, like in France, they were saying to go into the supermarket to buy groceries, you had to have a vaccine passport. These are things that we'd never seen before because, again, in the United States, we have a free market system. And you can say, look, I want to sell to straight people, gay people, black people, white people, right? We saw segregation by race years ago. Now we're seeing segregation by medical status. And the problem is that these very same left-leaning liberal doctors are the first ones to make the argument that you cannot deny somebody that's morbidly obese care based on the fact that they don't take care of themselves. Now, they do say for transplants and things like that, if you're a drunk and you're still a drunk, you can't get a new liver. If you're a smoker, you can't get a new lung. But if you're not, they're pretty liberal with that too. They're willing to help people and forgive these sins because that's the Hippocratic Oath and that's what they believe in. But when it comes to COVID, there's a growing sentiment amongst doctors right now saying, you know what? Well, maybe we can't treat you if you're not vaccinated, or maybe you can't work, or maybe you can't do this, maybe you can't ride public transportation. So it begs this question, whether or not is my ability to participate in society based on a vaccine, on what you say it's based on, or is it because my rights come from God and not from the government, and I'm entitled to certain taxpayer services that I pay because I pay tax.
Right into the system.
Right. So this is a debate that I think we really have to have. And I think it's when it gets to the courts, and I think inevitably it will get there, I think the people, like they like to call the anti-vax people, are going to win on most parts. I mean, some states have police power where they can do a lot of things with these police powers. And there's a Supreme Court case from 1,000,000 years ago called, I forget who versus Jacobson, but you could Google it. This Jacobson case is very alarming. I think it's from 1954. And wow, what an eye-opening case where they said that, the government can forcibly, tie you down and sterilize you. And that's something that happened. Right. So the argument now is if we can sterilize you forcibly, then we can surely put a little jab in your arm. But I think another point that I want to make is that they've consistently moved the goalpost on this stuff. So you've had, a year ago, it was considered a conspiracy theory. If you were to say they're going to want to vax your kids, they're not going to let you get, this, they're not going to let you do that. Everything's going to require this lockdowns and, camps and all these things. And some of that stuff is happening around the world. I don't know that it's all going to happen here in the United States, but many things that were once considered that's just right-wing conspiracy is actually now happening. Right, 1,000 or some odd flights were delayed because there's a shortage on pilots. It's not that
I think it's a labor shortage, and they don't want to admit it because I think some are holding out and saying I don't want the vaccine, as well as not having enough people. Yeah, but why don't they say it though? To say it then.
Well, I think a couple of CEOs have kind of alluded to it, saying we should probably get rid of masks and allow people to do whatnot. But by and large, a lot of people are under the thumb of the government here because at the end of the day, every single airline is considered a federal contractor. Without the feds, they have no business.
Good point. Now, all right. So this is the part that, I always love all your input, but this is something I'm really dying to get your input on. So I think politics kind of are changing, as you know. I have 4 buckets, majority buckets. Obviously, there's some external, but I think on the left, you have the leftists, way over to the left, the AOCs. You have moderate liberals. You have the Trump MAGAs, and then you have the Lincoln Project folks. Now, again, there's some subsets, but I kind of have four big buckets. A, do you agree with it? And B, I think the more buckets we make, the more harm there is. What do you think?
Yeah, this is one that I enjoy because I think while there are many buckets, one of the biggest things that's ever attracted me to being a conservative, part of the liberty movement, Republican, and I'm not necessarily a Republican. They just happen to align more with what I believe.
Yeah.
My stuff is about belief.
Correct.
I think that you have situations today where back in the days, it was cool, right? It was very cool that we had something called a big tent party. And it was okay because you could be an evangelical Christian, you could be a Hispanic, you could be a moderate, you could be pro-business, you could be so many things and fit into the Republican Party, and we all got along. The problem is that in recent years, it's gotten very, very clear, I should say revealed, if you will. People are more and more people pay attention to things. And now we have conversations we never thought we'd have. Like people are actually angry that government is wasteful in spending. That's been going that way since forever. But people are like, it's crook A or crook B, the Democrat or the Republican. Nobody cares. They're all crooks. I'm just going to be apathetic and not vote. Right. But that's not the case because Donald Trump, he brought something, a level of energy that I've never seen in my lifetime. Some say it was similar during the Reagan Revolution, but I was only a little kid. As an adult, I've never seen anything like this where you have people. I had a friend call me from jail. I have some friends that have sordid pasts and gave me a call. And he said, bro, I took him to lunch before he went to jail. And it was for drug sales and whatnot. And he, old friend from like 6th grade. And he tells me, he calls me from jail. And he says, yo, you were right. And I go, right about what? He goes, bro, everybody in here loves your guy, Trump. And I was like, they talk about politics in jail? He said, bro, they're all talking about the First Step Act, how their baby's mom is home from jail, how this is happening, how so-and-so got out. That level of impact at that level, that's beneath the street level, right? That's the jail level. I've never seen politics permeate so deep. So I think Trump brought about a new level of consciousness in politics where people are saying, you know what? I may not like this or I may not like that, but I like what he has to say and I'm listening to it. So when you have the MAGA crowd, I think the MAGA crowd is hard to peg because if you listen to the left-wing media, they'll immediately tell you, oh, the MAGA people, oh, those people are white supremacists. Right. Those people are absolute bigots. They hate everybody. But then there's guys like me and they can't explain that. So they'll just, he's the brown face of white supremacy. And this is what they do because they can't really figure out why on earth would somebody actually care about capitalist policies? And why would somebody want to see America revert to the way it was during the Industrial Revolution? And the reality is there's a lot of people that want to make it on their own, too, as opposed to receive from the government. So when you have these big buckets, you've got and I'll agree to the 4 that you talked about. And I think there's probably more, but who cares? Because the reality is I think there should be no buckets or 100 buckets, whichever way
whatever it is, the market should determine. Correct.
That's totally it. The more ideas, the better. If your ideas are better than mine and you have a radio show at the same time as mine, you're going to do better than me. If mine's better than yours, I'll do better than you. And I think that's how it works, right? I used to have a barbershop. I had clients. I earned my clients. They liked my haircut. Super. I earned a client. And that's how it works. So I think this is what we're seeing now, and AOC and the left, the all-out crazies, as I like to say, they're dominating with their, not even cloaked Marxism. It's an outward Marxism. They're like, hey, we're communist sympathizers. We think it's a good thing. We can show you how to introduce communism in America, and you're going to love it. And I think that is flawed, and this is why some people are saying, wow, we've never seen this unabashed attack on American society, on American institutions, on America's economic system. And more people are willing to have this conversation.
Okay. So why is it that, because, I'd like to, God forbid, watch a different type of mediums. I try to watch the alt mediums. I try to watch the big mediums. We all do. I listen more to your show now than ever. And my question is, why is it that we don't talk about the First Step Back more? Why don't we talk about the urban enterprise zones? Why don't we talk about how the historical Black colleges do not have to go back to Biden for money because they've been funded? And why can't we talk about these other initiatives? And listen, here's the deal. Whether you like Trump or not, I don't care. That's what makes this country great. But one thing that's undeniable is some, if not, I can say all, because it's a broad stroke, but some of these policies that I aforementioned are helping people on the ground. What about, and respectfully, and I'm going to kind of get into a dicey area, but Operation Warp Speed, and I'm going to say this, might have been one of the most important initiatives by an American president in modern history. I said it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right.
Yeah. So
here's the deal. I think,
yeah,
first of all, this is something I spoke at CPAC about last year. And
yeah.
the question was, should the Republican Party be doing more outreach to Black people? I think this is an interesting, or even communities of color, as some would say. The question truly to me becomes, should the Republican Party be doing more outreach to white people? Yeah. And the reason I ask that is because why should we be defining people by race? Now, if you're going to do it from a demographic perspective as a marketer, and you're going to say, my customer is a whatever, the problem with doing that is, let's just say the majority in this country are white people. So that's just why everybody else is called a minority. So if you have the majority of your party being white, and that's on both sides, then what do? You want to break out and reach out to people. Granted, I do believe that there should be more outreach to all people, not necessarily, and you can do it by race if you want to. If you want to target like Haitian immigrants that are now Americans and are eligible to vote because they're citizens that live in, Brooklyn or live in South Orange, New Jersey, or wherever you want to do it. That's great. I think that's the job of a political marketer, to break it down by segment and say, yeah, we're going to go after this community because we want to reach out to them. The criticism that often comes from the Republican National Committee is that they don't do enough of that. Now, they do have coalitions. They have a Black outreach. They have Hispanic outreach. Are they really effective? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But I think the bigger question is, this is a free market of ideas. Nobody has ever told me, Rich Valdes, you cannot start a PAC. You cannot start your own show. You cannot start your own streaming platform. I can do whatever I want to do as long as I can afford to do it and get customers for it if there's a demand. So I really always lean in that direction, because I think, you know what? Who cares if they're coming and knocking on my door, right? If you're a registered Republican, you might get something in the mail. If you're not, you're not. I believe that's what Trump can go out there specifically and say he dealt with issues that were important to certain communities, like the First Step Act. And he said, you know what? And what happened? A bunch of Black people joined on and said, you know what? We're on the Trump train. We're part of the MAGA movement now. And as so much so that we heard it happening in prisons, at least in a federal prison where my buddy was attending, or sequestered to. So I think that's a big part of this, where I don't know that we should be dependent on any political party. Plus, I think that the natural order of things in politics is as such. Yeah. And it's like anything else. If I want the RNC to pay attention to me, if I think, man, you know what, Puerto Ricans are really on the fence. The Puerto Ricans in Orlando, they're very conservative. They left under a brutal Democrat regime from Puerto Rico after the last hurricane. They're now in Florida with DeSantis. These are really easy converts that you can have, right? You can make that case. Nobody's stopping me from going out there and raising money independently and saying, you know what, I'm going to do a campaign with these guys in Orlando through a PAC that I'm going to start. And then I could go to the Republican Party and say, hey, look, you know what? I just did this. This was the result I got. You guys should jump on this. And if they want to get on, they get on. If they don't, they don't. And that's where I'm at. A lot of people don't agree with me. And they think that, we've got to do what they do. We've got to have that great messaging that the Democrats have. Again, I don't know that we should always go after segmentation by race, because it's exactly what we speak against. It's a
little dicey. Yeah. Then you get into identity politics and that kind of stuff. All right. This next one. That's why I love having you on. Okay. So I'm just going to say it. I felt Trump was not only smart to say with Candace Owen that he got the booster, that he got the shot, that he endorsed it, and that he endorsed Warp Speed. Rich, I love the move. I'll get into a second why matters more important what you think, because you're the expert. Walk us through what you thought of his interview and what you thought of that statement.
Yeah, well, that's very kind of you. Listen, I've always held that this is the Trump vaccine. I totally believe that. While I may not like the idea of forced mandates on vaccines, and I'm not even going to say I'm a supporter of the vaccine, because I'm really not. In my own real life and with my dad, when I was a caregiver to my dad, I didn't ever really subscribe to the pneumonia vaccine, to the flu vaccine, for my own children's vaccine. I'd had my kid's doctor, the pediatrician, said, you really should get this for your kids. And I was like, I'll hold off. Only what they need to go to school. That's always been my take. And not because I'm some sort of RFK Jr. type of anti-vaxxer. I just really was just like, if I don't need it, I don't need it. That's probably what they call in Puerto Rico the jibaro, right? The jibaro, and us the people that live on the countryside. Hey, I got a stomach ache. Eat some yuca. It's not about always treating with medicine. And I think that's probably where that comes from for me. I think with some African-American populations, there's that whole Tuskegee experiment that really messed them up, and rightfully so. I get that.
Universe.
But Trump specifically, I think in that interview and in another speech that he did, he said, we did that. We did that. Take credit for the vaccine, folks. Take credit for it. And I thought, wow, that was terrific. Yeah, and they booed him. They straight up, his own people booed him. And I think it's because there's a high degree of misinformation out there. And there is an addiction to genuine conspiracy theory. People really love that stuff. Yeah. And because it's become so proliferated through the internet, through the last couple of elections, everybody is an armchair political expert now. And that's okay. I'm not saying they shouldn't be. I think they should. I think more people, we should be able to have these conversations more often and more openly with more people. Where one of the biggest lies, or two of the biggest lies that I've ever heard in my life, were don't talk about politics and don't talk about religion. Two of the biggest things that are going to impact your whole life.
Correct. So, all right. So this is just how I feel. And when this last election, and I actually could go back, I predicted not only Biden to win, but I was very close on the electorates. I think it was off by 1 or 2 states, but I kind of knew this was going to happen. And I think Trump lost the election. Here's why I believe is his base, or the base in the Republican Party. They're not going to vote for Biden, right? And they're going to show up and they're a lot more passionate. I felt he should have took more credit on the vaccine like he's doing now, message around that, and appeal to more the moderates like myself, where I could say, you know what, I don't like his rhetoric, but I love his policies. Let's go his way. And I felt like the messaging for the moderates on both sides, like, you might not get the Lincoln Project guys, and you're not going to get the AOCs, but you'll get the classical Democrats, and you might increase the MAGA base. You know this, Rich, if you and I are running for president, we don't got to win 50 states. We got to win 4 out of 7, right? Why do you think that messaging, is that the right message? And if so, why wasn't it done earlier on in the campaign?
Well, here's the thing. I really, looking back at that stuff, I think Trump had a very solid message going into that campaign. And I do think he was effective with a lot of independents. And I don't have numbers in front of me to really make this case very effectively. But I can say there was also a suppression of regular turnout, in that you had all of these votes that were expected to be one way or another, where they became sort of, in my opinion, nullified in many ways. And it's still coming out, like some of the stuff coming out of Pennsylvania right now, where they're saying, they had all these ballots and they didn't count. And they didn't count them because of the chain of custody was broken. And then other situations where there was chain of custody broken and they did count the votes. So I think there was a series of lawsuits from the Democrats, from Hillary Clinton's former lawyer, Mark Elias, where they kind of rendered certain things null and void, mainly the Constitution and how we would elect the president in 2020 in the name of the pandemic. And I think, should we have followed the rules the way they were supposed to be followed, we would have seen things very, very differently. But it turned out in a very different way. So now, with respect to this down the middle conversation, I think that's just the current state of affairs in politics, right? So I get criticism from the left, and that's fine. I take it as it comes. But I get criticism from the right, and it's because I'm not saying things like, I want to sleep on a bed made of the bodies of leftists. I don't say stuff like that, because I really don't. I don't have a problem with people that are leftists. There are people in my family who may be that way, neighbors of mine. I disagree with their politics, and I think their politics are destructive to our country. But I can't sit there and hold you personally accountable, saying, because you voted for Biden, I should bash your skull in. And I think there's a number of people that do believe that, because of the oversimplification that we have in politics. Plus, there's this move towards incivility that I don't think is being promoted by anything that's American. I think there are foreign interests at play that are out there, making this agenda front and center. And that's why, we had January 6th, and not to get too much into that. But when you look at January 6th, as you look at it day in and day out, and what's coming out of this committee and what doesn't come out of the committee, it's very clear that, wow, it seems that the FBI had such a greater role in this than was originally perceived. Nancy Pelosi seemed to have a direct line of communications with these people that had not spies, what's the word I'm looking for? Human assets within, within these groups, to the point where some of the people who were the leaders of these groups had no idea what was going on with these same groups. So you had the Proud Boys saying, "Oh yeah, we stole a flag and we stepped on it, but we didn't break into the Capitol." And this is corroborated by the FBI, who said there was no insurrection. This is their official report. But again, the damage was done by the media. So I think as we see that, we see, wow, there's such a heavy-handed role of the government in this stuff, and it goes hand in hand with everything that you're talking about.
So I'm going to drop a link. If anybody wants to come and ask Rich questions, the rules are very simple. You pop in, they got to be respectful. You'll be immediately kicked off. Rich is a very good friend of mine, and we will not tolerate nonsense. Not that people are disrespectful, but just in case. Okay, but so let's talk strategy for a second. Okay, so Trump, let's say, decides to run in 2024. How do you message around January 6th?
Yeah, well, I honestly don't think it's as big an issue as one thinks, but of course that will be the campaign against him, right? You're gonna
if I'm going against you, I'm playing a constant loop on that mother,
Of course, you show Trump talking and people breaking into the Capitol. I think the reality is that there are so many people that are aware, and this is, I guess, the point I was making before, where I think there are a lot of independents. Look, I spoke to a guy the other day. I interviewed him on my show. His dad was one of the founders of the bombing movement back in the 60s with the Weather Underground and these other groups like the FALN that bombed the United States Capitol and other federal buildings. And he was an engineer by trade, and his family saw him become radicalized by the left, by the Marxists. And I asked him how he did it. And he said they would go to meetings where they talked about Karl Marx and studied it and really became a thing. And the next thing you know, my dad was making bombs and blew up, I think, 12 or 14 buildings. And he was not a conservative by any means, the gentleman that I had the conversation with.
Yeah.
But he admitted on the show, he said, look, the movement towards the left and all of this communist sympathizing that's going on is not good for anybody. He also discussed how he saw this what he saw back then happening again with this move towards the left, this adoption of Marxism where radicalization is becoming commonplace and almost welcomed. And you see that with AOC and her friends, where they make radicalization the only answer to overcoming climate change. You've just got, if you're a radical climate denier, that's destroying the world in 12 years if you don't support what I believe. And it's that type of authoritarian or totalitarian thinking that I think is messing up the minds of a lot of primarily young people. But with that being said, there's still a lot of sage wisdom. I come from a Puerto Rican family. I think you come from an Italian family where, your grandfather, your grandmother, your aunt, your uncle, there's somebody that's older that's going to come to you, maybe pinch you in the cheeks or smack you gently across the face and tell you, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I think that's happening right now in America. And there's still a lot of people out there that say, look, win, lose, or draw, good, bad, and ugly. This guy, Trump, we did better. And I think that's the bottom line. So he could say, they say January 6th. I say, look at your tax return, right? And I think that's really the message. People are going to be like, you know what? I was doing better. If you were black, if you were brown, if you were white, if you were whoever, you did better under Trump's administration than anybody's doing under Biden. Less people died of coronavirus during Trump's time in office, at least in 2020, compared to 2021. This just came out in Newsweek, a fact check that I looked at. And it's more than 100,000 people died in 2021 versus last year, where there was no vaccine last year for Trump, and Biden's had 3 vaccines and this massive distribution. So it begs the question, what is it that the Democrats are doing? And I think if you're effective in your messaging and you say, what are you doing? We've got more dead from coronavirus. He said he was going to shut down the pandemic, not the economy. We're seeing the exact opposite. We've got record inflation. We've got record gas prices, and we've got record crime in so many big cities across America. I don't think people are signing up for that.
Good point. So we have he's a good friend of mine, another close friend, Joe, aka Bay Eighth. You're on with the esteemed guest, Rich Valdes. Joe, what question do you have?
Okay, so 2 questions. Well, 2 things. One, what's up with Joe Manchin and the Build Back Better Act? Like, what do you think about what he's trying to pass, Biden, and will it pass?
But no, I think that's dead. I think it's definitely dead. They went as far as they could, and I think for many reasons. When Joe Biden ran for president, he said that, he promised us one term. He didn't talk about a reelection until about 3 weeks ago. So I think they decided we're going to put everything we can into this thing. I think Barack Obama, his pick was Kamala Harris, and I think he put his support behind Harris. I think Harris has proved both in the primary, where she couldn't get not even 9% of the vote to become president. She's proven to be equally as ineffective and inept in Washington, whether it's the border, whether it's every issue she's actually touched. She doesn't do a good job on it. So I think you look at all of that stuff and you think, I don't think they're going to get everything passed, but they're definitely going to try and pass everything they can on the front end, whether it's executive orders, whatever it is, because they know they may not get reelected. Now it's got even worse. Now it's looking like they may not even hold control of either house of Congress. So with that happening, what ends up happening? Well, I think Kamala Harris is in a position to try and carry this mantle forward, but it's going to be difficult because Biden's poll numbers are doing horribly. And I don't really believe in poll numbers all the time, but when they're all saying that he sucks, he sucks. And the only person that sucks more than Joe Biden is Kamala Harris.
Yeah, and it's really sad because look at what's happening now. I mean, people, not to sound crazy, but, $200 this year is not getting you what it was getting you last year. And that affects all people.
Spend so much of it on gas and food.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
That's the problem with inflation. And this was predicted. If it wasn't for the fact that Trump, in all of these public displays that he makes, he called it, and many did. It wasn't a secret. But he's on the record saying, if you do this and you do that, we're going to suffer massive inflation. So CNN on Friday reports, this is the worst we've seen. Biden's worse than Carter. And that's CNN.
And they're really very pro-Democrat.
Oh, for sure. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. The Democrats are like, bro, we got your back. We will cover for you in the media, but you got to give us something to work with. Right now, you're giving us nothing. You give us a vice president who does zero and a president who they say, hey, let's go, Brandon. He goes, yeah, I agree. Let's go, Brandon. He's insulting himself.
And the whole Trump thing, I have an idea of what I think might have happened because it happened in my household. We're Republicans. Mm-hmm. I would never vote for Biden. But my wife, who is a Trump person, went with Biden because of the antics that Trump was pulling.
Interesting.
He was just talking himself into a hole, and you're looking at the guy and why are you saying half of this shit you're saying? Tell people get the vaccine if you want. If you don't want to get, you know what I mean? It's like he's just attacking people. And it was just some of the stuff he was doing was very, very petty. You know what I mean?
I hear
for a
that
president.
criticism a lot. And again, for me, I don't have a weak stomach when it comes to politics. I could care less what Donald Trump is saying or honestly what he's doing. I'm happy to criticize Bill Clinton for getting frisky in the White House when he did. But I'm not really going to yell at Trump for getting frisky before he was married to Melania and when he was a billionaire playboy. Because to me, they're two different things. So I think, I just don't care. I wasn't electing a priest. We're in a very difficult time of our history where we're looking at a really bad situation for America. My kids are older and now they're becoming adults and they're going into the real world. And I need a guy like Trump that's, kind of reminds me of my dad in many ways. My dad was a guy, he wasn't the guy where they'd say, use your words. He didn't use words. My dad would point and whistle. And he would, one warning, he went like this, hey, cool it. If you didn't cool it in that minute, you were going to get these massive, large hands that my dad had that looked like each knuckle was a rock. And that's how it worked. He always went to that route. Now, am I saying should we all be violent? No, but I'm saying there was once this old school guy that said, hey, enough is enough, and that's it. And I think Trump's cut from that cloth, and he's an anti-war guy, but he meant business. He knew how to take money out of China's pocket. He knew how to take money out of Iran's pocket to slow them down, North Korea. He did a lot of things that I don't care what he was saying. If he wanted to call Rosie O'Donnell a dog, that's his problem. And I'm willing to look the other way. Yes, guilty as charged, because I don't care because my country's on the line. And if that's the guy that I need to get it done, then that's the guy.
Of course, that's my whole thing. Exactly. Yep.
Exactly. But now you have people that were like, oh, I don't like the mean tweets. I don't like this. I don't like the name calling. I don't like the childishness. That's their prerogative. But I think today, those same people and a whole bunch of Democrats, they're all saying the same thing. Man, I wish we had Trump back.
Yeah, I hope if he runs in 2024, all those people like my wife that went with Biden will definitely be voting for Trump again.
There's
because
also
they
a
didn't
big
think it could
movement.
get worse, and it did.
You're right. But there's a big movement amongst young people that are not necessarily buying into this. There's a bunch of young people that are saying, screw college. I'm not going. I'll read books. And they're very smart and they're really learned. And guess what? They're going to be able to vote. And these people, they're not, oh, I don't get involved. Like many people don't talk about politics and religion. No, these people go straight for the jugular when it comes to politics, and they're to the right. So I think, you know what? This is a great time to observe politics in America. And I think Trump has a really good shot should he decide to run again.
Yeah,
I agree. I just want to jump in for a second, Joe. If anybody wants to jump in, because we're going to be wrapping up soon.
Yeah, I got to get going, Rick. I just wanted to. I'm listening. I got to run to the post office. My job is calling. So
don't go postal, Joe. And hey,
no,
it's your barber. It looks like we go to the same barbershop.
I was going to say you're very, very handsome. So that's why I wanted to come on. I was like, if this guy has hair, I'm not coming on. But if he doesn't have hair, I'm jumping in. I'm like, that's my kind of guy.
There we go.
So in the Joe Manchin thing, what's up with that guy?
Yeah. I don't think Manchin is in a state that it's one of few states that has a Republican and a Democrat in the United States Congress, where they're not of the same party.
Right.
It's incredibly conservative in that area, and not only is it conservative, but these guys are coal miners, right? There's a whole lot of that in West Virginia. The Build Back Better thing had so much of the Green New Deal in it. They were basically saying, "Hey, look, West Virginia, we're going to kill your top industry."
Yeah.
They didn't want to. Manchin knew if I do that, they're coming for my head. And I'm not going to get another election under the belt. So what did he do? He did what he felt was right, which is what you're supposed to do. He's become a hero of sorts. But in reality, it's just political survival. There was no way he could have gotten behind this thing. And he said it. And he's been alluding to it. I mean, you look at some of the video where he's shaking his head in the background while Schumer's talking and going off the deep end. He's just like, what are you doing? Like, what happened to you? Because so many people have gone off the deep end. And I think many everyday Americans are just looking at that and they're saying, you know what? These guys might be smooth talkers, but they're driving America off a cliff.
Yeah, so you think $3.5 trillion is a bad thing? That whole Build Back Better thing.
I think Build Back Better is a bad thing.
Yeah, Build Back Worser. How about that? All right, Joe, guys. Thank you very much.
If not, I appreciate you coming on your way.
I'll be listening and commenting. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. I'll talk to you later, Tom.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye.
So we got a few more minutes before we wrap up. Probably around the 45-minute mark, we'll wrap up. But so the funny thing though is if you look at Trump's policies, right, and you know this, Rich, even the conservatives weren't always dancing a jig either. Look at, for example, when he would install tariffs to China, right? And a lot of, constitutionalists, conservatives are saying, we don't believe in tariffs. We don't believe in economic tampering. Let's win on the free market. And he said, listen, I know like you're my base and I know you're this, this, and this, but this is what's right. And I'm a business guy and I can play hardball. And the truth of the matter is it worked.
Yeah, well, again, I think China excluded. I mean, originally the pushback from a lot of people on the right was that he was putting tariffs across the board. And that did have a consequence. But he was judicious with it, and I think pulled it back when we were, I talked to some guys that import washing machines, and they were saying, man, it's becoming really expensive because of all the aluminum tariffs that we have and the little parts that we use. So I think that began to got scaled back, and the administration figured out early on, Navarro especially, who was the trade advisor, they figured out, they said, you know what, we can put these tariffs on China, which is where they belong, because these people are stealing our technology and they're just human rights abusers. And nobody would get in the way of that because it's another way of sanctioning a bad actor globally. I think with the other stuff, it was a bargaining chip and it did work, and it was a risky one, and it took a businessman to bring that sort of risk. But yeah, I think by and large, as a general rule, I would still remain that the government really shouldn't be getting, more tax is not the answer.
Good point, Rich. So Gazoo is a good guy. He's a friend of the show. Gazoo, here with Rich Valdes. Take it away.
Hey, Rich, Tom. Great subject, great show so far. Really loving it.
Thank you.
But my question for you, Rich, we know a lot of talk on 2024. Everyone's talking about Trump or DeSantis. But really, next year is going to be a wild year, and I think it's going to have an impact not only politically but economically, kind of touching on the subject. But what do you think the Democrat tactics are going to be to try and minimize the bleeding, maybe not lose one of the chambers of Congress next year? What are some of the tactics you see going into
I think
2022?
Democrats always use the same tactics, right? It's always the same thing. So it's got to be somewhat related to the war on women. You hate transsexuals. You're a white supremacist. You're a racist. This is horrible. And, it's the insurrection. If you elect these guys, we're going to have even more of that in the White House, in Congress. So they're going to use more of the same, which is clearly going to be the case. They've already pivoted. As of Friday afternoon, the whole talk of the town is they're going to take away your right to vote. You vote for these people, they will eliminate your right to vote. Jim Crow is resurrected in the filibuster. And if we have any type of speech and debate in Congress, that this is going to be a racial divide that we can never overcome. So I think they're going to continue to use this same rhetoric. But the thing is, they've been using that and it's not working. And they're in the driver's seat, right? They've got the House, they've got the Senate by super slim margins. So I really do believe that if we don't mess it up, Republicans will do well. It doesn't mean America's fixed. It means it's a step in the right direction. I agree with you that, the economic impact that we would see is really now, right? Had we gotten this Build Back Better passed and into law, man, we'd be sitting on, all this extra spending. And again, they're saying $3.5 trillion and it's paid for. I don't know anybody who knows how to count. Levecki is an MBA. He can tell you the whole thing was fake, it's phony, it's fraud, it's fugazi. Yeah. It was just not real. They were saying it was paid for by us, and it wasn't paid for. Obviously, it was going to be paid for. So I think we dodged a bullet with that stuff. They've realized that. Democrats tend to be very, very slick. They serve in government for themselves, as opposed to a lot of people. And I don't mean to make it so black and white, but there's a lot of people that get into politics just to serve. I think there's a lot of Democrats in particular. They've perfected this. And in New Jersey, especially where I live now, they've made this a science where it's like, I don't become a teacher per se because I want to educate children. I become a teacher because I know exactly what the income is and I can do well and I can retire. And I guess what? If I get a master's, I get this much of a pay bump and I got this. We'll buy a house down the shore. We'll have a house here. They figure out their whole life. It's never about educating a child. So I think the altruistic view of public service has been lost on Democrats for a very, very long time. But there are still people that get into this for the right reasons that want to make a difference. So I think we're going to see a lot of that moving forward. Just last week, we saw a bunch of Democrats that said, we're not running again. Nancy Pelosi said she's retiring. So we're going to see some major changes because the Democrats have been weakened. But one thing they've always been good at is if they know they're going out and they know they're going to take a bath, what do? They make sure that they get involved and set up these beautiful deals so that they can actually make money while they're not in office. So everything that they're putting into play right now, or they got involved with the infrastructure deal, I would bet my bottom dollar that there's a kickback somewhere, somehow, a legal contract, a construction contract to somebody related to somebody through a subcontractor or somehow that where they're going to make a truckload of money by leaving office. And it makes sense for them because they always hedge their bets.
So one question that I'll jump off long term. So this question should be good for Tom because I know it's near and dear. He's both a huge free speech advocate and obviously being on the YouTube platform, a huge advocate of technology. Obviously, it's not the most friendly place for conservatives these days. How do you see that changing for better or worse in the next couple of years? Thanks, guys.
Great question. Rich, if you want to handle it, then I'll jump in.
Sure, no problem. I think we're seeing, again, something that I give Trump a lot of credit for is actually sacrificing something, right? Some people will tell me you're nuts, it didn't happen, but I can tell you from what I've seen, Trump lost $500 million or $600 million during the time that he was in office. Went in worth this much, left, and got kicked off the Forbes list. So I think that sacrifice is exactly the lesson to all Americans. So many Americans need to look at the example of Donald Trump, who I like to call Donaldus Magnus, El Trompito, the 45th president of the United States. He says, you know what, I'm going to leave this beautiful skyscraper, this golden thing on Fifth Avenue, and I'm going to take my supermodel wife and move into a swamp. It's horrible there. They're going to attack my children. They're going to try and indict my children. We're going to do all of that, but I'm going to do all of that because I actually give a damn in my 70s about this country. Mind you, Trump could easily stay in New York, stay at Mar-a-Lago. Where doesn't he have a beautiful palatial home? He didn't have to do this stuff. And I think it's, even though he's a billionaire, maybe theoretically he can afford to lose more, I think the example remains the same. So many Americans can afford to lose. So his next venture now, to get back to the technology, is he's got this Truth social network. and he's gonna and there's a TV network, a streaming platform, radio stations, all of it. And he's getting investors and all. There's a lot of partners involved in this. So rumble.com just got involved with them, and there's an IPO on that. So I think there's going to be money and there's going to be success in that. And we're going to see that. And that's going to continue to grow. And that's just Trump. There's going to be others that say, you know what, I'm going to jump on that bandwagon. Look at the success of Newsmax, the growth of Newsmax. OAN also maintaining its competitive status. So I think there's going to be more options. Will it take out YouTube and Google? I don't think so, not at least not immediately. But it will create an ecosystem where people can spend their money and their search history and their browsing time and whatever, and give more of an alternative, more of an option. And I think as that happens, it will only strengthen the movement of people that are for liberty, for the Constitution, and for America.
Yeah. And Gazoo, really quick, I tell this story a few times, and I don't know if I've ever even told Rich. So Rich was on New Theory, and although New Theory wasn't as big of an audience, released a video, and then 24 hours at the time, you should get about, I don't know, 1,000 views or whatever it should get, right? And they got like 17. I said, oh, wait a second. I know Rich and I are not I know Rich and I are the best guys to look at, but we got something to talk about. And it was on, and the best part is, because people know, I know digital marketing, I titled it after Trump lost, it was, where is the conservative party going to go? And I'll post in the community for people to check out Rich. But my point being is, it was a legitimate conversation that I wanted Rich's opinion. Where will the conservative party go from now? Not even like, we didn't get deep into politics. We didn't get into policy. It was just two guys having a good discussion. So I said, okay, you know what? 17 views. Let me go ahead and boost it, right? Because you could boost on YouTube and you could pay to boost it. About 10 cents a view. A little expensive. You don't really make your money back, but it's to get awareness for the brand. And it was a great show. And Rich, as a friend, was happy to do it. It gets rejected. I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean rejected? I want to boost it. Okay, rejected. Tom, let me go to Twitter. I go to Twitter organically, where normally we get about 3,000 impressions, another 50 views. Gets like one impression. I'm like, all right, you know what? Let me boost it on Twitter. I will pay to boost it on Twitter. Gets rejected. So it's like, I have to do a live to capture. And the best part is, I usually do between 200 and 500, depending on the time of day. I'm capped at 50. If you don't think the AI is listening in, and you don't think they're listening to what we're saying, and you don't think I'm popping up as many lives, you're nuts. So Gazoo, I am fucking scared. I might as well curse at this point because nobody's listening anyway. I am scared that we can't have. Rich wasn't yelling. I wasn't yelling. You come here like a gentleman. We may agree on some things. We may disagree on others, but you can't even have a fruitful political discussion. And in my opinion, it's disgusting.
Tom, let me just throw something in there because this is so interesting. When they started the social media platform Parler, last December, it really kind of blew up. I signed up in, I think, 2019 because one of my colleagues, it was an early investor and wanted to support the platform. And again, it's similar to Twitter. And I remember signing on, and every day the growth that I would experience. I've been on Twitter since 2009. I got on Parler in 2019. Yeah. But the growth was 3 to 4 times the rate on Parler because nobody was stopping anything from happening. So if I did a radio show or I had a good podcast or whatever it was, people would hear it. Okay, I'll go check you out. No growth on Twitter. So I was like stuck at 20,000 on Twitter, got up to like 75 or 80,000 on Parler, and then that dissipated when people left with the Trump exodus. When he left Twitter, people just got out of social media. But the same thing happened on Getter. On Getter, it's a relatively new platform, signed up not too long ago. Probably 3/4 to the way of my Twitter following, I'm already on Getter. And again, it's so the engagement is higher, the retweets or reposts. And so to me, it's a classic example of an experiment when you have a control versus when you don't have a control.
Correct.
And you look at Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, where they really suppress things they don't like, and they know the keywords they're looking for. And I learned this originally when I worked with James O'Keefe at Project Veritas some years ago, where a lot of his stuff, he would do the same thing, and he was not dumping a few bucks. They would dump $5,000 to $10,000 per video to boost these and sponsor them on YouTube and other places, and they would still not perform the way other videos were expected to perform. And the reason being was because we learned by putting somebody undercover from Project Veritas into Google and YouTube, where they realized, and Twitter specifically, that they use this technique called the shadow ban, and that was when that word became a thing. because
Yes.
they set it on undercover video and they go, oh, we shadow ban them. They think people are watching, but nobody's really watching. And they admitted it on tape. So, I mean, this is something that we actually know has been happening. So when I say they hate me, I'm being facetious, but I'm serious. They really do hate me. They know Rich Valdes with an S. Oh, that guy's got nothing good to say.
Jesus. Is there any more questions? We're wrapping up soon, but you got another question.
No, I'm going to jump off. Again, thanks again. Great show. Way to kind of keep the afternoon going.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on, because it's always a pleasure. So one last question before we wrap up, and then I want you to plug your shows on your show. So as a media guy, like I struggle with platforms as well. And I kind of say, you know what, like for you, a little more partisan information, if you will. Where are you going to go? How are you going to do it? Are you, so like I looked into Rumble, I looked into other stuff. What's your strategy for 2022 for getting your message out there?
Yeah, well, honestly, I'm going to, it's probably not the best answer, but I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I don't have a lot of bandwidth to continue to expand to a lot of other platforms. There are some other platforms that are very popular. However, I happen to have two left hands when it comes to social media. I post, today's story, I'll post it tomorrow afternoon. And it's like, that's the cardinal sin. I'm just not great at it, but I mean, I use it and it's effective. I'm still very grateful for mass communication. Not just social media. So, I mean, even, like the podcast, I look at my podcast numbers and I thank God every time I see good numbers, because I realize that there's a lot more people that actually will listen and download the show than will ever retweet something or like it or even follow me on social media, because it's like 5 times the number that you see there. And I think, wow, thank God for these closeted conservatives, right? Or even not even conservatives. There's other people from the left that will comment later and say, you know what, I don't agree with you, but I'd like to know what you guys are thinking. So whatever the audience makeup is, it's there. And my point is, the radio, podcast, television, these things still work. I haven't really delved into streaming like you're doing right now, video podcasting. I haven't, because to me, it's just a ton of work. You seem to be really good at it. But for me, it's like anything that throws me off from being able to talk. If I have to press buttons and move a mouse and do a lot extra, it really does distract me. I'm sure I'm going to have to adjust to that world. Because that's the way of the future. But my strategy is to continue doing what I'm doing. The idea of content being king used to be true. I think now it's your content strategy is king. Make sure that it's the question you're asking. How do you stay ahead? How do you stay on top? And I think word of mouth has been excellent for me, and asking people to share stuff via text message, because nobody's shadow banning text messages.
Correct.
And that to me has been really good.
And just to give some advice to people out there. So what I actually do, and what we do at my other magazine, and I'll get you involved with there, Rich, too, with that is we create pillar content. Like I'll create this video, and what I'll do is I'll just dump it into iTunes as an MP3, because you know what, maybe they can't see us, and they're probably lucky for not seeing us. But what I'm saying is it still has the same effect. You might lose some of the je ne sais quoi here and there. So I just create content at one point and then try to find ways to push it out. But you're right, though. There's not that technology where I can hit a button and push it out to Parler, to Rumble, to all these different places, and then
where you can repurpose everything. And that's why the people that are succeeding, Bongino, Shapiro, these guys that are killing the game. I mean, I read an article not too long ago. Big shout out to Dan. They said his Facebook was getting more than like CNN, and it's because he's really good at it. I mean, talk about social media savviness. He's super clever. But B, he's got a team of people, not a huge team, small team. Unlike Shapiro's got a big team. But you can see the impact when you take it as a business and you say, all right, I'm going to hire a part-timer to start doing some digital content, writing the content. I'm going to pay you. We're going to get a sponsor to cover this. And, it's work. It's work and it's a business. And I think that's the way to grow, is to never look at it as a hobby, never look at it as something other than what it is, which is, you're in effect running your own media empire, no matter how big it is. And trying to grow that little world every day to get more and more listeners, viewers, eyeballs, and ears.
Is Dan Bongino originally from New Jersey? I want to say he is. Queens, a Queens guy. Okay, I was going to say. I knew it was New York and New Jersey. I'm a big fan of his. So we're going to wrap it up. So give us where to find you. I'm going to put links below to Rich's show. This is America. You got to listen. It's cool because I knew some people knew who you were already. It's also cool that some people be turned on to you, and those that do watch your show, they seem like a pretty loyal bunch. So how can we find you, Rich?
Sure, you can check me out at This Is America. That's on iHeartRadio, and any podcast app will find it. This Is America with Rich Valdes, Valdes with an S, and I'm at Rich Valdes on all the social media. So make sure you spell it right, Valdes, Valdes, and you should be able to find me. And you can follow me on every platform. I've got a lot of social media out there. I try to keep up with as much as I can.
Love it, Rich. Thank you for being on the show. Just hang out a minute. We'll talk off.